Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Minnesota Rack Stars podcast. And today we have with us Jason Ziegler, also known as Zig. He is a land specialist for Whitetail Properties. So if you're looking to either sell hunting property or buy hunting property, this is going to be a pretty good podcast with some great information for everyone. With that, we're going to get to the podcast. But first, if you would please, when you download our podcast here, I would appreciate if you'd go and leave us a 5-star rating. That helps us get our content out to more people, and that's ultimately what we want to do, is help educate as many people as possible, and also hopefully it's entertaining as well. So with that, let's get to the podcast, and I hope you guys enjoy it. All right. Well, first of all, thank you for taking time out of your day today, Jason, to be on this podcast with me. I think we're just on the front side of things here, really kicking off with the market in all real estate. Specifically here, we're going to be talking hunting properties. But before we get going into that, let's just hear a little bit about yourself and who you are and what you do.
Yeah, that sounds good. Thanks, Joe. Before we get going too much further, my mom doesn't even call me Jason, so you're welcome to call me Zig throughout the podcast if you can remember that. Yep.
Perfect.
Yeah, that's good stuff. So, no, my name is Jason Ziegler, aka Zig. Work for Whitetail Properties. I live just northeast of Frazee, and I grew up on a farm between Frazee and Perm, dairy farm, and found my passion for hunting through my father and his father, so my grandpa and that family, and ultimately was able to position myself to get into a field of selling and helping people sell and buy hunting properties and any type of real property now. But extremely fortunate to do what I do. Absolutely love what I do. It's not I know it sounds cliche, but I truly don't have a job. I get to go walk land for a living. So pretty dang fortunate.
Yeah, no doubt. You get to see a lot of different things when you walk a lot of different properties. That probably sparks some pretty good ideas for your own properties and whatnot. How'd your past hunting season go?
And I tell you what, Minnesota was pretty tough.
Yeah.
I know the Wolves are getting all the press, but at the end of the day, when you combine that with two just major winter events that we've had, the numbers are certainly down across the state, and in certain regions get hit even harder with the predators. I believe there's been a handful of groups that have popped up to discuss the Wolves, but ultimately it's a combination of both those and the tough winters. And we really struggled. There was no question about it. I've got a home farm here just northeast of Frazee, and that's notoriously a really good area. And man, we had a tough hunt. We didn't we never shot a deer. Not that we couldn't have, but we just didn't see the numbers that we're accustomed to. So this winter certainly going to help us. We needed this big time. Yeah.
100%. Kind of the same things around here. I didn't see really the jump in the antler growth that we usually do, because of the winters we've had. But I'm optimistic. I know my brother missed a really nice one last day of firearm season, and also I picked up a couple nice bucks that I have not had on camera all year show up after season. So that's pretty cool. To have that optimism, going into this next year. Did you guys get out and do any shed hunting at all?
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, that's the key thing right there, is to have the optimism, and to your point about bucks jumping in antler growth. Really, those last two winters have hurt them. They come into the springtime and they're putting all of their energy into their body versus their headgear. And I've actually had a handful of bucks that regressed, not progressed, last year, which was a little bit disappointing, but understandable. So yeah, got out, did some shed hunting. I'm not a huge shed hunter. I usually find the sheds when I'm turkey hunting or when I'm not looking for them. But there was a buck that I got up at my cabin that we specifically went after. We did find one of his sides. Of course, we spent then hours looking for the other side. Had no success for him. But yeah, so there's and to your point, about a couple deer showing up late. We had two show up really late that I have no idea where they came from. Don't care, but they're definitely some studs, and be curious to see what they look like coming into this fall.
Yeah. I don't know if you've watched any of our videos at all, but we do a family shed hunt each year. We got a pretty good property where deer like to congregate during the winter. Good thermal cover mixed with good agriculture. We do a little annual family shed outing, and we end up finding, I think, 18 sheds or so.
Nice.
And the cool part is only 2 of them are match set. So there's a lot more to get out there and try to find. But my best find this year was this guy.
I think I saw that on one of your videos. That is
I
a
could not believe it. I just could not believe it. I was sitting there and um, I think I put on about 8 miles, and I was with my cousin, and he was gonna head back. I'm like, you know what? Just drop me off here. I'll make my way back to the truck. And I told him if I find a spike, I'll be happy. And this
that,
surpassed my expectations right
yeah,
here.
that isn't even a legal spike, is it? I think
No, it's
you
not.
could probably put a doe tag on that if you wanted to.
Right?
Yeah.
Exactly. So that was pretty cool. Yeah, we enjoy getting out there. Like I said, we're fortunate to have a property where deer like to hang out throughout the winter and get out and do that. And it's fun getting the kids out there. And creating those memories for them. A lot of the guests that I have on here, I've asked them this question, and I want to hear your answer to this. What is your very first like major hunting memory that you have? If you think way back to when you first started hunting, something that really stands out, whether it's a hunt or just a memory that you have that you're always going to have with you.
Well, I'm getting up there in age now, so my memory ain't nearly as good as it used to be. But I can tell you right now, as a matter of fact, I can specifically remember my dad walking in and saying, "You're going to come hunting with me the next day." And I've wanted since I could actually have a physical memory. I remember wanting to go hunting with dad. And when he told me that the day before rifle season, and back when I grew up, you only had a 2-day season and or a 4-day season. So you could hunt Saturday, Sunday, or if you got your tag for the second weekend, then it was a Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday type event. But we always just hunted the first 2 days. And we were dairy farmers, so we were busy. But I'll never forget it. Dad said, "Listen, you're gonna come." I didn't sleep that night. And then the very next morning, we had our stand was made out of square straw bales out in the middle of a field, which was very typical. And that was actually kind of the Taj Mahal back in the day. But he specifically stuck me in facing into the northwest wind, snowing out, and I loved every second of it. Most kids would have been froze and tired and wanted to go in, and ultimately there was a couple bucks that were fighting in front of the dad when it became light. Which, if you think about what we do now in terms of access, ingress, and egress, and having the wind direction right, and all that, none of that was in play back in the day. But anyway, dad was fortunate enough to have a couple bucks, and you could party hunt back then. And heck, I think I was an hour and a half into my first hunting experience, and I got to watch dad shoot 2 bucks. So that's my first memory, and I was hooked before that, just always wanting to be part of that crew and be part of the team and the guys. But from that particular moment on, that was it. I found my passion in life, and it was a clear, vivid memory, and I can picture it as sure as we're sitting here right now to this day. Yep.
That is so cool. And I like asking this question because people who are listening, if there are any out there, just what you said right there brings back so many memories for me because my first stand, I went out my first year hunting. I sat in one of my grandpa's stands, but my first stand, that was my stand when people said, well, we're going to go to Joe's stand. My first stand was on the edge of a cornfield, cut cornfield, on a flatbed hay rack with straw bales around me. And I'll tell you what, when that wind was howling, I would just get down low in those straw bales, and man, was that comfortable in there. You got out of the wind. You could rest your gun real easily on those bales. You get real solid and get a good shot off. But yeah, it brings up a lot of memories for myself too. That's pretty cool. And then just cool of your dad to bring you out there and kind of get the ball rolling for you and in such a cool sport. Everybody always asks me, I coach basketball. I'm a head boys basketball coach. I teach phy ed. Everybody always asks me, what's your favorite sport? And I always say hunting. Hunting's my favorite sport.
Absolutely, no question
um,
about
I,
it.
I don't know if you remember, but we've met before.
Yeah, you and
And
brother Travis. Yep.
yep, yep.
Mhm.
You guys actually sold us a piece of property kind of up in your neck of the woods. And yeah, that's kind of where I first met you and started following you on Facebook and whatnot. So I've learned a lot about you. Not even speaking with you a whole lot, just met you kind of on the day of the sale. But yeah, we still have that property up there.
I was
We've
going to
made
ask.
some adjustments to it. It's 63 acres is what we ended up purchasing,
Hmm.
and I won't elaborate too much on how I found it and stuff because I think that's more for later topics. But that property that we bought there, I mean, it's a really good property. It's 63 acres. There's only about 25, maybe 30 acres of timber, but then there's lowland with it. Um, but every year since we've bought that property, we've had for sure a 3, if not a 4-year-old come through that property and stick around in that pre-rut, that late October time, which makes it really cool having that property there. Uh, I bought that property with my cousin when I lived in the town of Little Falls, and I really wanted a piece of property, and found this piece, and we went and looked at it, and we we bought it, and then like a year later, I bought this place that I'm living at right now that has 43 acres on it, and so I hunted up there kind of the first year quite a bit. But then since then, it's only been a couple times I've been able to get up there. My brother goes up there hunting quite a bit. Um, so I've got this property here that I hunt. I have a couple other permission properties around here that I hunt. So I, I don't get up there as much as I would like to,
Hmm.
but running trail cameras up there, it's nice for me to have multiple properties because in the end, every single property has a potential shooter.
Bingo.
So that means I can go up north. If he's showing up north, I can stick around here. If something's showing up around here, it just makes it a lot more convenient for myself to have those options.
Yeah, there's definitely pros and cons to owning multiple tracks. I think there's more pros than there are cons to owning multiple tracks versus one large track. And you hit the nail on the head in terms of, and I've subscribed to that thought process pretty much my entire whitetail hunting career is to own several multiple tracks and to try and get them in really good neighborhoods because then I will typically always have a good deer to hunt, right? And last year was a prime example at home here northeast of Frazee. Yeah, we had a couple borderliners, but nothing that I was interested in shooting. But thank goodness I still have, a secondary property up north, and that one seems to always have a good deer on it. Heck, back in my heyday, I'd have 3, 4, 5 different properties. The con to that is trying to keep up with them all. There's a lot of work, as you know, going into maintaining a property, putting food plots in, brushing trails, just you know, running trail cameras, et cetera, et cetera. So that's probably the con versus owning one large tract. And owning one large tract gets to be difficult, to say the least. One, there's just not a ton of large tracts that ever become available. And two, if you truly want to have one contiguous large tract of land that you can grow and hold and manage deer without relying on the neighbors, whew, it's going to be one, a big chunk of property that hardly ever comes up for sale. And two, you got to have some deep pockets. So ultimately, I think that owning several smaller tracks is probably the right process if you can get them in the right areas.
Yeah, and I've kind of heard, and I don't know if they've always done this, but they've made it a point of it, like the Drury brothers down in Iowa and Missouri and stuff. Um, they've kind of gone to that approach too, where he's having multiple properties in different locations because of blue tongue. All of a sudden, blue tongue comes through and wipes out, your herd. Then you have nothing to hunt. So, yeah, there's definitely benefits. But like you said too, like the property that I got up north right now, it's tough to get up there sometimes, but at least I have that option. I'm not complaining by any means.
Yeah, that's a good problem to have, Joe. Yep.
Yep, exactly. So we'll kind of transition into the real estate side of things. So I know you kind of mentioned it a little bit. But maybe kind of elaborate on it a little bit more. How did you end up in the real estate business?
Well, I mean, it's kind of an interesting story actually. I was working for a repping firm. I was a national sales manager for an independent repping firm, and we rep products for like Primos or Muck boots, that type of stuff. We were basically the middlemen, and I was in a position where I could finally afford my first piece of hunting property, something that I owned. I was fortunate enough to grow up on a farm where I was hunting on all family owned stuff. Well, at at some point, everybody understands that runs its course and either get pushed out or it's not a substitute for owning your own piece of property. I showed up, it was an 80-acre tract over by Wolf Lake, Minnesota. And I showed up to look at this property, didn't know nothing about real estate, absolutely zero. Called the guy that was, had a sign in the ground and called that agent up, and he met me at the property, and I had a handful of maps and a list of questions, and I was sitting in his truck with him, and it was kind of misting out. It was probably 45, 50 degrees and it was misting out, and asked him a bunch of questions that I thought were pretty relevant and still green, not knowing enough about the purchasing process. But unfortunately, that guy couldn't answer a whole lot of my questions, and then started inquiring about where I got the aerial photos and how I came up with these questions. And I thought, well, why are you asking me those questions? And then the straw that kind of broke the camel's back was I was like, all right, well, I want to look at this property. And the guy straight up looked at me and said, I'm not getting out of the pickup. It's raining. And I thought, I'm trying to buy an 80-acre tract worth a couple $100,000 here, and you're not going to get out of the pickup and walk the property with me and show me where there's pinch points and funnels and talk about habitat, et cetera, et cetera. So I got out. Needless to say, I got out. I walked the property, fell in love with it, figured out that it was a stupid good investment, and it was exactly everything that I was looking for. So I still ended up buying the property. But it didn't take very long for me to put two and two together, and the light bulb switched one evening. I was like, well, if this guy can sell hunting ground and he's making a substantial amount of money by not even getting out of the pickup, I'm going to go get my real estate license. So I talked to my boss. I said, hey man, here's what I got going on. I don't want you to find out skirt tail, but I'm going to get my real estate license. He said, oh, that'll be a great part-time job for you. Well, 3 months later, I handed in my resignation and I've been doing this ever since.
That's awesome. That is awesome. And that's kind of why I'm doing what I'm doing now, is because all of a sudden, I see a lot of people doing things online and stuff, and I'm like, man, I really love doing this stuff, and I don't make a dime off of this stuff. What I do here, nobody's paying me cash to do all this stuff. I do it because I love it, and it was just one of those things where these other people can do this. I want to try doing this, and what it's turned into is me building relationships with other people I've never met before, people I've very seldom talked to, people like yourself that that I'm gaining knowledge from, and I'm hoping that I'm helping other people gain knowledge from. And like yourself in the real estate business, I'm sure you've walked properties before with people and said, like you said, this is a stupid good deal here, at some point, and you're trying to help those people out and guide those people in the right direction of purchasing property. So that's kind of cool. It can kind of I kind of correlate with that, and it's one of those things where you feel good when you're helping somebody out and you see the light bulb turn on for them and experience something you've been able to experience when buying property. Because I I don't know if there's another feeling like it when all of a sudden you make that first purchase of a property. My wife and I were going for a walk last night, and I said, "Do you remember before we had this place, driving by it and looking at it and just thinking, man, how cool would it be if we owned this property here?" And now all of a sudden, here we are today. It's been 4 years now that we've lived here, but just the excitement that it brings and the memories that it's given us so far is just absolutely amazing. Going back to your memories, okay, I asked you about your memories with hunting. How about your first sale? Do you remember
Yeah,
that first sale you made?
I do. Before we get into that, though, I'm going to just hit on a few things that you just brought up. When you're going for your walk last night with your wife on your piece of property that you own, there's not a monetary value that you can put on that. And that's why owning land is probably the greatest investment. Sure, it appreciates over time, and sure you can, probably sell it and make a profit monetarily, right? But what value do you put on that when you're able to go for a walk with your wife and decompress on property that you've always dreamt of owning? And that's something that folks that, I get into that conversation with them quite a bit on, okay, yeah, so I can go stick some money in the stock market, or I can, have a bond and I know I'm going to, probably get a certain ROI on it, right? What's the value of being able to walk on your property and go decompress and have all of the stress leave your body, or watch your kids create memories, or even create memories for yourself? It's something that extreme passion that I have. And to your point, I get goosebumps. I think selling hunting ground in real estate is a parallel to actually bow hunting. I'm a big bow hunter. I get just as jacked up, and this sounds ridiculous, but if I can put Joe Call and seller A together and watch both of their dreams come to fruition, I get literally like fist pump, let's freaking go, jacked up for not only the buyer and the seller, just the same as if a 140-inch deer walked in and I zipped an arrow through his lungs. So it's huge. It's a good point that you brought up, but this is truly a passion for me. And I get excited when I hear stories about you just telling me about walking on your own property and how you dreamt of being able to do that. And now you're actually doing it. So, tip of the cap to you, my man.
Well, you look at all these people out there that own these places. I mean, you know what the market has done here in the last few years. It just, obviously it skyrocketed there. All these people that could sell out right now for quadruple what they bought for back in the day, maybe even more than that. My place I bought 4 years ago, I already have doubled. It's already doubled in price. And I told my wife, well, let's sell, but the only place we're going is Iowa. That's the only place I'm going to move to. Find a job down there. But no, it's one of those things where there's a reason why people hang on to these places and don't sell out, because money can't buy everything you just talked about. Those memories that you create. And, I was thinking the other day of what improvements I'm going to do to my property. And the light bulb kind of went on for me. I'm going to start transitioning my property. I have 2 daughters. I hope they decide to hunt here once they get older. But I'm going to start transitioning my property so that if we all have to hunt here on these 43 acres, that each one of us has a really good spot to go to. So I'm going to start strategizing my property where there's 3 good spots that we can go out, when they're home one day for firearm season, or once, they reach 12 or whatever age it's going to be when they're going to start hunting, that we have 3 separate spots that we can go to and have a good chance of killing some deer. But yeah, that's the one thing that you transition as a hunter throughout the years. First it's about you, and then all of a sudden things start to change a little bit, and all of a sudden it's not about you so much anymore. It's about your kids or your family or your parents, like myself. I kind of look to get my parents back out in the woods because they're the ones that got me going. I made sure they were with for our shed hunt the other day. I've gotten my mom and dad both back out in the stand. They haven't hunted in a long time, but that's where the value is in having your own property.
Yeah, and that goes back to that question that you were just telling me about. Do I remember my first sale of my real estate? And it's kind of come full circle. Yeah, the first property I ever sold was for my dad. He owned 40 acres. Out of the 40 acres, there might have been 10 acres of high ground, and the rest was swamp. But it was in a really good spot. And Dad said, "Well, do you think you can get me $1,500 an acre for that?" Which back then, no. The answer was no. But I said, "I'm going to give it a try. It'll be my first listing," and we sold it in 2 weeks for $1,500 an acre. And now what you were just talking about, setting your property up for your kids and someday for your family or for your parents. My dad, just most recently, last couple of years, 2 years ago, I sold his last remaining piece of property, but he was worried about where he's going to hunt. I said, "Well, you don't ever have to worry about that. I've got 2 farms.
I got your back.
Whenever it is." Yep, absolutely. So, um, it's just kind of one of those things where it's come full circle, where Dad got me into this, and he's gonna always have a spot to hunt, as long, provided I'm fortunate enough to continue to own a piece of property, which of course I plan on doing until the day they put me on the ground. So yeah.
That's awesome. How about the craziest sale you've ever been a part of? And you can go anywhere with this.
Well, I have to say, yeah, because crazy is a term that, man, that fits into the real estate world pretty dang good, because there's been some stuff, but I think kind of going along with the theme of prices and where things have gone here in the last 3 or 4 years. This was right beginning with the COVID era, right? We didn't know what that was going to do, and everybody was pretty worried. And ultimately, what that ended up doing for us was extremely beneficial, because folks realized the importance of getting out of the city and maybe even having a piece of property that they might not be a hunter, but something that they can sustain themselves on, or a place to go so they're not cooped up, what have you. So I would say the craziest thing was the first time that we've got into what I would consider a multiple offer situation / bidding war / whatever you want to call it. I'd done a market analysis for this guy. He had 10 acres. 10 acres is all on a private lake, but it was more of a mud lake, some fish in it, but nothing spectacular. And he had bought it right before, I think in 2006 or 2007, when right before the market had crashed. So he had bought it at the top end of the world. And I told him, I said, look, I think I can get you 150 grand for it. I know you paid 160 for it. We'll do our best to try and get that. And he was okay with it. He understood. Well, we put that on right when the market was starting to get crazy, and the craziness ensued with this particular property. One was in a great location. Two, it had, a private lake on it. Again, nothing spectacular, but it just went back and forth. I mean, there was probably right out of the gate, I think we had 9 offers on it, and they were all over asking price. And that 10 acres that I did a market analysis on, that said on paper it was worth 150,000, ended up trading for $232,000.
Wow.
So
Wow.
crazy train. Yes. Yep. And the
That
seller
is.
was super happy. And so
Yeah, I was
was
gonna say. I bet he was pretty happy there.
Yep.
I'm just gonna tell you kind of the story how we ended up with this property here. um, so I work where we live right now. It worked out perfect. I drive about 20 minutes to work, and I go south, and my wife goes north, and she's got about a 22-minute drive. So we were looking in this general area for a house, maybe with some land if we were lucky. And I saw this place come up
Oh, you
for sale
froze.
online. And I'm like, okay, that is the location that, we would like to be in. Oops. Are you there yet? There we go.
I got you back now.
All
Yep.
right, we're back. So
Yep.
we were looking for a place in this location, hoping to find some property with it. And I saw this place come up for sale online. And I told my wife, let's just go look at it. It's way out of our price range. But let's just go look at it. And we came out here, we looked at it, and we walked away. Told them that it's way out of our price range. The realtor, it's way out of our price range. Can't afford it. We just wanted to come out here and look at it. Well, we go back home, and all of a sudden, I'm watching, online. I usually watch Zillow, Craigslist. Back in the day it was Craigslist. Now properties are for sale everywhere online. But I ended up seeing that it came off the market. Well, I contacted the owner through Facebook, and I said, "Hey, we went and looked at your property, and your house, and I see you took it off the market." I said, "If you're ever interested in selling again, um, let us know because we'd be interested." Well, she responded, and we started talking, and we ended up reaching a price that we could manage. And she said, "Okay, I'll agree to this." And she goes, "What are you going to do with your place, though?" I said, "I'm going to put it online by myself on Facebook, and I'm going to try to sell it myself." She goes, "Okay." So immediately, I'm just fired up that she's agreeing to do this. I take a bunch of pictures of our house, and I post it on Facebook, and I jack the price up. I'm like, if in order for us to buy this other place, I need to make some money on this house that we're living in. So I jacked the price up, and we only lived there for 2 years. And all of a sudden, I'm going out for softball practice. I was assistant varsity softball coach at the time. I'm going out there, and all of a sudden I get a text message. "Hey, this is so and so. I need a house. I love your house. I don't even need to look at it. I'm gonna give you full price." And I was like, "Whoa, what is going on right now?" And I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm going in fast motion. I'm going over to the head coach. I'm like, "Look at this. I got a full price offer on my house. She hasn't even stepped in it, whatever." But
Yeah.
this was just on the front side of COVID before everything took off.
Yep.
And so I'm like, "Okay, I'm gonna make an entire year's worth of my salary by selling this place." I said to my wife, I said, I think we should do this. She goes, "Well, what if this other lady doesn't want to sell us her place?" I said, "I don't know. We'll get an apartment for a while until we can find
You
something."
figured it out. I love it.
So we end up coming up and got a purchase agreement for our place, and I kept hounding this lady that owns the place that we live in now. Like, let's get the ball rolling here. She backs out on us.
Ooh.
She backs out on us, and we went through with the sale of our other house and moved in with my in-laws for the second time. And we moved in with them, and it was about a month later or so, they sold their house. So then we moved with them up to my wife's grandfather's place up in Baxter. And I think it was about 3 months after this all kind of started going down. I just shot that lady a message saying, just let you know we still don't have a place yet. If you're still interested in selling, we're still interested in it. And after a couple text messages, she finally agreed, and we got a purchase agreement signed, and the rest is history. But yeah, that was
You were
kind
on
of a
a,
nightmare. But
yeah.
um, I was optimistic throughout the whole time that something was going to work out. But yeah, it was one of the craziest sales, but also kind of a nightmare. And that's where I kind of want you to go with this next question I have for you: is the biggest nightmare that you've ever encountered in real estate?
That sounds like a weight loss program that you were going.
Yeah.
Um, man, well, there's been some crazy stories and some nightmares of deals I've had. Man, yeah, I sold a giant farm in Polk County one time, 480 acres, beautiful property. Had a big pole shed on it with some living quarters, and I guess I'm just going to leave name. Obviously, I'm going to leave names out of
Yep.
this, but the particular seller, I don't know if he was all there in terms of being mentally stable. The buyers come to take possession, and they were out of state buyers. They're from Indiana, and the security system was ripped out. Um, there was a backup generator that was gone. Furnace system was taken out of there. The guy had some cattle. One of them was butchered right in the front lawn. I mean, I would say that ended up being a nightmare. Just at the, and then that's probably not the right term to even call it. It was a yeah, it was a mess. Called the seller up. I'm like, hey man, and he's like, well, that wasn't written in the purchase agreement. All of that stuff is attached. It's part of the real property. And yeah, and we ended up getting sheriffs involved and all of the rest of that stuff. So that was probably my biggest nightmare in terms of helping folks in terms in the real estate career. Yeah, so not good. Personally, not quite similar to your story, but certainly a weight loss program for me. I had where I'm living now, I'd put a purchase agreement on and then ended up looking at where I have my cabin at and fell in love with that property all at the same time. And so at one point I had a contract on two different properties, but still needed to sell the house that I was living in, and prayed that that would all come together. And I don't know, it took probably 8, 9 months for me to get my place sold, get the place that I live in now bought, and the cabin bought. And I did lose probably 10, 15 pounds stressing out how I was going to make all of those ends meet. But, ultimately, if you have faith and you work hard, good things happen. And now I have my two forever properties, that one up north and the one where I live at now. So,
Yeah, that's the thing. You nailed it on the head. You got to work hard in order to own property. You got to work hard. Myself, I teach, but in the summer, I mow lawns. I got my own little lawn mowing business that I bust tail, during the summer, and I like doing that. It keeps me busy, keeps me out of trouble, but also it puts extra money in the bank to help me afford, hunting properties, which makes it pretty cool. Now talking, working hard, gain that money. The market in the past 3-4 years has been insane. What it has done, and obviously right now it's a little different, but kind of talk about the roller coaster that you guys were on as real estate agents once COVID hit and everything just started skyrocketing.
yeah, it's an interesting dynamic. There's no question about it. It ultimately, to the category that we're in, it all comes down to supply and demand, especially from a hunting perspective and recreation perspective. And again, I think COVID is what set the buyers in motion more than anything. And then also, so you take that dynamic of COVID and people being cooped up and not having anywhere to go and they're stuck in their house, right? And so now they're all you add that caveat to it, and then you have sellers, right, on the current landowners that hey are super thankful that they have their piece of property that they can go recreate on and decompress on and hunt on and do whatever. And you take those two, so now all of a sudden we have no supply and we have a ton of demand. It's simple economics 101. If you have a ton of demand and not much out there, what's going to happen? The price is going to go up, and it's going to continue to go up until those two level off. When I first got in this industry, which was 2010, I believe in 2011, my second year of real estate, I had like 80 some listings. If I'd get a buyer lead from anywhere, I was doing backflips. It is the complete opposite right now. There's so little inventory and so much demand that it has to drive the prices. And so ultimately, it's one of those deals where you have to ebb and flow and you know be adaptable to that. And one of the things that I thought was pretty interesting was in 2023 now, prices did level off some, but when interest rates spiked, everybody thought it was going to crash. Well, it didn't slow anybody down, really. And I would say they didn't make the 20 and 30% jumps like they were in 21 and 22, but it still made an increase. Just again, back to because there's nothing out there for people to buy, and there's so many buyers out there right now.
Yeah, and it's going to get crazy here hopefully pretty soon. I mean, every time that snow starts to melt, we got snow here again. People get antsy. Even myself, when I already have multiple properties that I can hunt, I still go online to look for pieces of property that you just never know that might work out in the end. But it's like you said, it's leveling out right now. Um, what are you anticipating for this spring here? I mean, spring's kind of here right now, but
Well,
what are you anticipating?
we've had spring since January. Really, we haven't
Yeah.
had a winter. It's the first. It's normally my first quarter is I can go do whatever I want because I'm not busy. Ultimately, because of especially the last 2 years with all the snow, it's a mental shift. Folks just don't think about selling or buying when there's 2 feet of snow and it's 30 below. That's just all there is to it, right? So we've had a really probably we will end up, when the numbers all shake loose now that we're done with March, we'll have our best first quarter that we've ever had because folks are able to go out and look at these properties and I don't see anything slowing down. I don't know how many phone calls I've already fielded this morning coming out of the Easter break. For an example, we've got a 40-acre tract up by Maplewood State Park that's coming up for auction, and I probably fielded 6 or 7 different calls on that this morning. We had a property preview on Saturday, and I think there's 13, 14 different groups of people that came through. So, I mean, it's still gangbusters right now, and the only time that that's going to slow down is when the supply again either equals the demand or outpaces the demand. And so I just feel like it's going to continue on this particular trend, which from a buyer's perspective is you have to be proactive. You can't, this is, and this is not a shameless plug. I don't care if you're using me, but if you're using somebody that specializes in what we're doing, you need to enlist their help. And here's why, because by the time you find it, it's probably either going to be pending or gone already. So you need to be in a system that somebody that does this every day, all day, once the property hits the market that meets your criteria, you're notified about it immediately, not 24 hours later, not 48 hours later. You need to know about it the second it becomes available. And so that's why you need to really do your homework if you're going to work with a real estate agent, and make sure that they're understanding what it is that you're looking for and where you're looking for it at.
You just answered my next question. Where does a person begin when they want to buy something? And you got to be ahead of the game. Like myself, I'm just for the fun of it. I just watch things online, see what the price is and what people are listing for. But yeah, you nailed it right on the head. You need to be in contact with somebody like yourself to be ahead of the game. Because if you're not, it's gone. How about like I don't know. It's either that or selling within, or to a neighbor or something off to the side, knowing somebody where you can, or have an opportunity to buy something. those are probably your only two options if you really want a piece of property is getting a hold of somebody like you, or just having a personal relationship with somebody where you're going to make a deal and not even put it on the market. That to me, that's kind of your only two options if you really want a tract of land.
So one of the things that I always do for sellers, specifically when we send out our marketing, I will give you a free market analysis. That is like basically my introduction for me to you as a seller, and I'll come up there and I'll do a full job. I'll walk the property. I don't come up with numbers from my computer and guess at what it might be worth. I actually go out there and do that for you, and then I'll never dissuade you if you're a seller and you have a relationship with your neighbor and you want to sell it to the neighbor for a particular number, have at it. I mean, I totally get that and respect those relationships. If you're a seller that you want to maximize your dollars, you need to put it on the open market and let the buyers end up ultimately telling you what it's worth, because that's typically where they will make their most amount of money. But from a buyer's perspective, if you have a personal relationship with somebody, that is a very good way, so you don't have to get into the competitive market that is the open market, right?
Yeah.
That way, and or you have to work with a land specialist, period. Otherwise unless you're like a day trader or something and you're studying this every day like we do, I mean, most buyers have a full-time job and they've got other priorities. I don't. This is my full-time job, and so we can help you find that right property.
That's what I like about like you guys when I went up and looked at that property for the first time that I ended up buying up north. Um, I knew I was going to be working with people who have the same mindset as me. Outdoors, you've seen properties, and you can bounce things back and forth. I know one thing, that I saw when I first stepped out of the vehicle. I looked down, the first thing I saw was a deer track, and I'm like, "That's a good sign. There's deer around here. If I can open up the door and see a deer track, that's fine." But what I like about like what you guys do is in all honesty, just looking at the wall behind you, you've shot some good deer. You know what it takes and what type of habitat holds good deer. Um, you know what to look for in a property that might give you a chance of harvesting some good deer. Um, that's why I like having somebody like you, like I said, to walk out. Yep, this looks good, perfect here. Um, just to give that extra confirmation on, yeah, this is a good property. Or, yeah, I don't know, look at all these stands right on the property line right here or something. You get those things where a person maybe from the inner city that's showing a hunting parcel that is maybe doesn't hunt or whatever might not pick up on those things, um, to help maybe persuade a buyer to purchase it or to go look at some other properties. So I think that's what you're talking about, like being a land specialist and knowing and seeing multiple properties. If a property is going to be pretty good or not.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot of factors that go into it. I get perturbed from time to time when I get other real estate agents that want to book a showing on one of my listings or anybody's listings for that matter, and they say, "Oh, I'm just going to send my clients out there." If you're a buyer and you have a real estate agent telling you just to go look at it on your own, you don't have a real estate agent. Ultimately, you need to be with that person. There's several different things that go into it, and I mean, we could talk about this for hours, but ultimately, to your point, Joe, you got to have somebody that understands what the habitat is made up of, the location, are the neighbors. Is it in an area where it's brown, it's down? Is it in an area where half the guys are managing them, half of them aren't? What type of cover does it have? What's your ingress egress? Is it landlocked? Is there an easement to get into it? I mean, there's so many different things. Is there any government programs on there? There's so many things as a buyer that if I just said go walk the land and you like the land and then you write a PA and then you come back and find out, holy crap, it's got XYZ wrong with it, or there ain't a deer left in the county because everybody shot them, or it's littered with wolves or whatever. There's just a million different reasons of why you should be working with somebody that specializes in that particular avenue. You're not going to see me showing somebody a house in town. I can promise you that. I don't like talking about curtains and countertops. I like talking about pinch points and water holes and where to set up. That's my gig. Yep.
What are so say somebody's working with a real estate agent, or maybe it's a situation like myself where I bought, from the owner, and we ended up working with a real estate agent to kind of write everything up. But What are some red flags out there that people need to be aware of when they're going to look at a property or they're about ready to purchase a property? What are some red flags in the real estate world that you've seen or that you can share with people?
Well, you know, there's two of them that pop up in my head right off the bat. One of them being make sure that there's no other easements. And when I say easements in this term, like ingress, egress easements that travel through the property for somebody else to access their property, because that will devalue the property. And then to go along with that, make sure there's no government programs on there that devalue the property as well. Those are two things that get overlooked quite a bit. And those are two questions that I ask typically of sellers immediately before I even go step foot on the ground. I'll do an aerial photo and I'll look at it. And if there's things that pop out, I'll ask the owners that. And the reason why those are detrimental to the property or the value of the property is, for an example, if it's an ingress egress that goes through the property that you're trying to buy, and you're sitting in your deer stand at 9 o'clock in the morning, that person has the right to travel that easement at whatever time that they want, right? And so ultimately, I don't want to be sitting in my deer stand and watch a four-wheeler drive by me at 9 in the morning or 10 in the morning, right? That's just one of those things where you got to be like, okay, got to be super careful with that. And then the government programs, there's some good ones out there. They're all good programs for what they're intended to do, right? But what they're not intended to do is to help your resale value. Some of them are really restrictive of what you can and can't do. Some of them you can't even put food plots in. Some of them, the only deer stands that you can do are like tripods or hang-ons. There's you know, certain requirements of building restrictions, et cetera, et cetera. So you really gotta, you know, dot your I's and cross your T's when you're looking at a piece of property from those two perspectives. And then we can get into the, you know, like it all depends on your goals with the property too as a buyer. Are you a hardcore deer manager and want to kill big deer? If that's the case, the first thing you got to look at is your ingress and egress, your access with wind directions. You know, is this property in a good area? Of course, if you're a big buck hunter, you're going to be looking in a good area. But then two, can I get it in and out of this property without blowing it up every time? You know, that's a huge thing that folks don't look at. And is it set up? Is there trails already in place, or is this a sweat equity property? Do I have to do all of the work? Again, we could talk about this forever, but red flags, I would definitely look at the programs, easements, and then ingress and egress, really.
Now, to figure out if a property isn't listed in a program, is that something you guys as the agents disclose that information, or how's that work?
Yeah, so the sellers should know, and sometimes they don't, but they should know if it's in a program. And if it's in a government program, it'll be recorded against the deed. And then once we figure that out, what's recorded against the deed, then we can get our actual hands on whatever covenant or program it might be, so we can find out, is it restrictive, is it not restrictive, what are the payments? You know, that's one thing that I think I saw on one of your list of questions here about what buyers can do. Is some of those programs are beneficial. Matter of fact, I have my two forever properties are enrolled in a program, and it helps pay the taxes and put a little extra money in my pocket every year, right? Which I put towards food plot seed and that type of stuff. So as a real estate agent, we ask the sellers, if the sellers think that is, or they don't know for sure, then we do what's called pre-title work and make sure, if it is, it'll be recorded against the deed.
Okay. How about landlocked? You mentioned landlocked. Is there such thing as landlocked? Were you talking about, you know, different ways of accessing properties?
Yeah, the answer is yes. Now, there's ways to force access, and there's laws on the books in Minnesota, and I'm not an attorney, so this isn't legal advice. But I can tell you, if there's a 40-acre tract and it's surrounded by county land, and there's no Forest Service road that touches it, it's landlocked. Sure, I can walk across that county land because that's public land, but if the county ever sold that property, which counties do, and they sold it to private parties, and you don't have an easement to go across that particular tract of land to get to it, you are technically landlocked. And then if you want to force your easement through these state statutes, as the guy that owns land that you're going to try and force that through, I'm going to fight you, right? Typically, right? And so then you're going to end up spending tons of money with attorneys, and the only folks that typically win there are the attorneys, to get access to that particular property. So yes, there is such thing as being landlocked. Two, it's very difficult to sell landlocked property. You have to find a cash buyer that doesn't care about the access, which is next to impossible, and or you got to sell it to your neighbor, right? The other thing that in the state of Minnesota, it's kind of interesting what's going on out west right now, that whole corner to corner access, right? That I don't know if that's considered legal access or not. It's a total opinion. I think those guys out west, they put a step ladder up or something and were able to, you know, technically cross from corner to corner, and the landowner did lose that, but they didn't step across. They put a step ladder up. So I don't know if that's the caveat to it or what, but yeah, you can be landlocked. There's no question about it. And it's again, something that you got to be mindful of when you're either purchasing or selling.
Yeah, there's properties that I've seen before, and just wonder like how much, like you said, it comes down to if you want to get money for your property when selling and you're surrounded by private landowners. You're obviously going to have to look to your neighbors to buy that property if you want to get a decent price for it. Otherwise, if I'm somebody looking for a property and I find a chunk of property, but it's surrounded by private property and I have to drive through theirs to get to mine, that's kind of going to deter me a little bit from purchasing that property because there was one place I went and looked at. It was a good chunk of land, kind of up in your neck of the woods up there, and it was a good chunk of land, and it was a fairly decent price, and it was just for sale by owner. And I went and looked at it, and I stopped by the neighbor's place and just kind of told him who I was and what I was doing. I was just looking at this property, and I said it shows that there's a legal easement right through here. And I said, can you kind of direct me where that is? And he said, yep, right there. And he pointed, and it was a trail going through the woods, was the easement. However, there was, I would say it was probably 20 feet high of stacked cut wood, not stacked, just piled up wood covering up that easement so nobody could go back there.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously I looked at him and said, okay, sounds good. Have a great day. And I just turned around and walked away. I'm like, I understand where you're going with this.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, it can get interesting. There's no question about it. Are you there, Joe? Again, what the heck?
But yep. All right.
Okay.
Now you're back. You're good.
Yeah. If they see a deal online on Facebook Marketplace or what have you, the old Craigslist stuff, and it seems too good to be true, it's probably too good to be true for a reason.
Yeah.
And
100%. One of those red flags we're talking about.
got to
How
do a
about
little. Yep.
how about on Beacon? I go on Beacon and I look at what its estimated market value is at and all that stuff. How close are those numbers to what it's probably going to sell for roughly?
They're usually typically a year or two behind the market. That's the way it's an assessed value that the county assessor is basing off of the last year's sales in that particular category, right? Assessed value on Beacon is the last metric that I look at when I'm using to price a property. We have real time data at our disposal through the MLS and through the ERCB website. So ultimately, I don't, and they can be high and they can be low. It all depends on what the market's doing, right? And I will give them credit. It used to be like a 2-year lag. Now it's at least it's just a 1-year lag. So they've caught up, and obviously, the assessors are sitting and doing their job, and they've watched the real estate market boom, and so they've got to do what they can to increase those values to bring in more revenue through taxes. That's kind of basically what's going on. So, but if you're a buyer and you're looking at something and it says here's what the assessed value is, or the perceived assessed value is going to be for 2024 or 2025, it's just know that they're working off of an old data set. So like recently, they haven't even been close to what the property's actually worth. And I've had people call me up and say, do you think you can actually get this for what they're saying it's going to be worth in 2024? And I'm still saying I can get all of that and then some, and here's why, and then show them the actual market data. So I would say Beacon it's a starting tool at best is what I would use it for.
Perfect. Yeah. Yeah. I've never, I don't know, known how to assess that. I've asked people about it, and they say, well, some people have said it's 10% less uh, compared to what it should be going for. I don't know. I just thought
That's
I'd ask you.
That's the old real estate model back when real estate agents didn't know what the heck they were doing. They would just take the assessed value and put a 10-15% premium on it. Or if you're in a regress, they would take 10-15% off of the assessed value. When I first got in the business, assessed values were way higher than what the stuff was actually selling for. Right. So, but now we're in a complete inverse of that, and properties are selling for way more than what they're assessed at. So, um, whether you throw a percentage to it one way or the other, again, that's the last thing that I look at. If there's truly a unique property out there that I can't comp, or now being in the business for as long as I have, come up with a number based off of my gut. If there's no other comps out there, I will look at the assessed value, and depending on the market, either tax them on or take some off. But that's last resort.
When I was looking for a property, like I had no clue as far as numbers go. Like I didn't know how much I needed to put down on it. Um, like, is there kind of a ballpark of like a down payment that somebody needs to have on a property in order to make it work?
Well, here's what I'm going to tell you with that is the lending on bare land or vacant land has come light years from where it was when I first started in a short, it's 14, 15 years. I just had a lender here actually text me yesterday or the day before saying, hey, we now have a 30-year fixed program on vacant land. So I have 3 or 4 specific lenders. If you walk into your local bank and say, I want to buy a piece of hunting property, you're going to think to yourself, I can never afford this. There's no way, because they're going to want 35% down. They're going to want a 5-year loan, and it's going to be amortized. And then they're going to want a balloon or an adjustable rate. And you're just like, as a buyer, I'd go home and throw up in a bag, right? Well, now there's lenders out there. Heck, we got a lender that'll go as low as 10% down with a 20-year fixed rate. We've got guys that'll do 20% down with a 30-year fixed rate. Be interesting to see what this other lender has come up with on it. He said he has a 30-year fixed rate, which is unheard of. That's never happened in the land lending industry that I'm aware of. At least it certainly wasn't the first 7-8 years that I was in this business. So there's always give and takes with these programs, so if you're going to be a guy that's in the low percentage of a down payment, which, if you take a 10% down payment on a piece of land, you're probably going to get hit with a point or two more on your interest rate. But if it gets you into a property, you got to weigh those pros and cons as a buyer yourself and see what's going to fit you. So to answer your question, kind of a long-winded answer to your question, yes, there's plenty of programs out there, and there's no set standard anymore. Before it was 25 to 30% down, and you're going to get a 5 to 10 year loan at best. But that's not the case anymore.
To help offset the price, with purchasing a property, you talked about some of the government programs that are out there. Where do you find information on that to take advantage of some of those programs?
FSA, Farm Service Agency, they're the ones that'll have the vast majority of the programs, whether it's an EQIP, a CRP, a CREP, a RIM, NRCS office also. They've got WRP, handful of property programs out there. Your Forest Service, you can do a forest stewardship plan on it, and that provides you to be able to get into 2 other programs, a 2C program or an SFIA program. The SFIA is what I have my properties in. I do have a little bit of CRP on one of my properties too. So there's a million different avenues. I would start with a real estate agent that specializes in land, tell them what your goals are, and then we'll help direct you to the right office and come up with a game plan for you. So yeah, I think that's kind of the route that I would go. But if you're trying to do it on your own, just stop in the Farm Service Agency office and in that particular county, and they can help you out.
All right. Let's go with this one. We're kind of running low on time. I don't want to take up your entire day here. Let's do this one here first. Let's go with what do most people overlook when purchasing a property?
That's a good question. One I didn't prepare for. What do most? I don't know if you can categorize it as most. Some people overlook certain things, and some other people don't. It all depends on who you are as a buyer. But I guess sticking with the theme of recreational property and hunting property, and specifically, I would say the number one thing that they overlook is their ingress and egress. And when I talk about that, I mean, not so much can I get in and out of my property, but if I have a predominant northwest wind from October 1 through December 31st, and I'm trying to kill big deer, is my access in the northwest corner? If it is, well, that sucks, right? It's pretty hard for me to slip in and not slip in the morning. I'm going to blow everything out of there, right? So I always try to, like if, again, back to goals, it all depends on what that buyer's looking for. But if you're a hardcore deer hunter and you want to manage your property right and have a chance to kill big deer year in and out, you're out, you got to have access from more than just one wind direction, I guess, if that makes sense.
No, 100%. And the property that I live on here, I bought it because there's a house here, and it's a good property. It's in a really good area. It's heavily pressured, but there's always a chance of shooting a decent deer. But yeah, my house is in the northwest corner of the property, and I have to access from the north, so it kind of stinks. But I mean, they can come from different directions and whatnot. But yeah, that's definitely one thing that I keep in mind too is access, and that's probably number one. And people sometimes jump the gun and they see a nice property and they jump on it, and then all of a sudden, how come I'm not killing any deer on it? Well, maybe it's because your entry route and exit route.
Yeah, it's easy to get caught up with emotion when you look at your properties for the first time. And I know in this climate you got to jump on something that if it's good because it's going to be gone. But if you're just starting out, my advice is to go look at 3, 4, 5, 6 properties and start to get a feel for it before you make an emotional decision that you might regret later on. So
I'm gonna ask you a couple layout questions here. You've been on a lot of properties before. You know a lot of people. What tendencies do you see on properties that produce big deer? Like what properties kind of match up? Like every big deer that I see shot, this property has this on it.
Well, for starters, they have good neighbors because you don't get big deer unless they get old enough, right? I mean, and we have the genetics in the state. Doesn't matter if you're in Roseau County or if you're in Winona County. From top to bottom, there's good genetics across the state. So you got to have them get old enough, right? So that's the number one thing. And then secondly, then you got to have all of the ingredients for that big deer to be there, right? You got to hunt it smart. You got to have food, water, and cover. And I'll take cover number one over any of it, water second, and food third. And the reason being is it's really hard to create cover. It's a heck of a lot easier to put in food than it is to create cover. It takes a lot longer to create cover than it does to put in food. And then water, I take that second because that's what if you're a big buck and you're rutting and you're in the cover and you need a drink of water and you got to go to your neighbors to get a drink of water, well, I might get shot over on my neighbor. So those three factors: food, cover, water, and then obviously number one, you got to be in a neighborhood where they're going to get old enough to be big.
That is spot on 100%. And I see it all the time. There's spots up by you, there's spots down here where all of a sudden you see a group of landowners kind of coming together and kind of just letting each other know what they're doing. That's the one thing people talk to me about, and I've entertained the idea of, do we start like a co-op or something? But the tough part is when you if you want to do that, like you can't go in and say we're passing up all these deer, because what's what one person feels is right isn't going to be the same for the other group. Because I mean, you can't say we're passing every deer until they're 2.5, 3.5 years old, because what are we going to say to the kids who are just starting to hunt? What are we going to say to um, the parents or whoever who are just starting hunting, their first year hunting, and they see a year and a half come out? You can tell them they can't shoot it. So it's kind of tough to
Yep.
go about that. You just need to have a good group of people around you that were kind of understanding and kind of have the same goals in mind, but yet be realistic as well and understand that there are going to be some small buck shot for, maybe those early on hunters or whatever the case might be. But yeah, location is obviously number one.
Yeah, I've been fortunate enough to help start a handful of those co-ops, and I call them guidelines. They're not rules, right? This is what we're hoping to attain. This is our number one goal, and this is what we're hoping to obtain, and here's how we're going to obtain it, right? And they're guidelines. I'm not ever going to tell my dad, who's, going to be 74 years old, that if he wants to shoot the first basket rack that comes out, go ahead, pound him. I don't care. Because when I'm 74 years old, I'm going right back to when I was 16. I'm going to be shooting every damn deer that I see, or if that makes me happy, that's what I'm going to shoot. But there's a core group typically within a neighborhood of folks that are fortunate enough to have shot a bunch of deer. We don't need to shoot another 130-inch deer. We would like to shoot 170-inch deer, which if you have the nucleus following the guidelines, that's perfectly acceptable. And if it makes you happy, kill a sucker. I don't care. That's, you just got to be mindful of what you're doing as a group. And nobody's ever going to be perfect, right? That's impossible. It's an expectation that should never get set. So there's inside of each county. And again, if you're working with a land specialist and you're a buyer and you want to be in one of those pockets, that particular land specialist will know that, okay, over in Hillview or down in Parker's Prairie, for an example, or anywhere along that Todd Ottertail County line, there's pockets, or New York Mills, big deer get shot and they get shot every year. And we're talking, when I say big deer, like booners every year. And the reason being is because that nucleus of landowners all subscribe to basically some of the similar values.
Yeah, that's awesome. And like you said, what makes one person happy isn't always going to make the other person happy. And you know what? That's part of hunting. I mean, um, you and I have different standards. My kids are going to have different standards, and that's what makes it fun. It's there are so many different thoughts and opinions and strategies that go into all this, and I think that's what makes it so fun. There's no definitive answer for anything in this world when it comes to hunting, and that's what kind of keeps me going. But I'm going to ask you one last question here. I want you to give all those people out there who are interested in buying property one last piece of advice before we cut it loose here.
Well, I think if you're just starting out, you got to do what's called delayed gratification. If you truly want your own piece of hunting property, one, it's not cheap, and it sucks. It's hard in the market that we're in. But if you truly, truly, really want a good piece of hunting ground, you have to do what's called delayed gratification. Don't go on that vacation to Mexico. Don't spend your money on something that you don't need. If you don't need a quad, don't buy a quad. Store that money away. Get yourself set up to where you can afford that 10, 15, 20, 30% down payment. And when you're at to that point, then definitely start working with the land specialist. And I honestly don't care who you're working with, as long as it's somebody that knows what they're doing and they're going to be looking out for your best interest. That's my biggest piece of advice. Is it's attainable, even though the market's expensive right now. It's attainable if you are a person that's willing to be disciplined and can store store that extra money versus going on a vacation now. And ultimately, to your point, Joe, when you went for that walk the other night, it's worth every dang penny when you do own your own piece of property.
100%. I never thought in my wildest dreams that I would own this property that I'm on now, own another 63 acres with my cousin. I never thought in my wildest dreams I would ever be a landowner like I am now. And I think the one piece of advice that really helped me start saving money is one of my buddies told me one time. He goes, "This is what I do." He goes, "Every time my paycheck comes in, I take what I had left over from the previous paycheck and I put it right into the savings and I don't touch it." And I just kept doing that and I just kept doing that. And all of a sudden I'm looking at my savings. I'm like, holy Lord, I got some good money in my savings here. And it helps being married too, having two incomes. But I just kept putting that money away. And what it did is it made me feel like I don't have any money to spend on, random things, or it makes me feel like I'm living paycheck to paycheck because I keep limiting myself on how many funds I have in my checking account. So I keep putting that in my savings. Next thing you know, there's my savings, and now I have enough for a down payment. So that's one thing that helped me kind of get to where I am. But you're spot on with that, 100%. You got to kind of prioritize what's important to you, and if purchasing your own property someday is important to you, well, then you'll make some of those sacrifices.
Absolutely. Yep.
Why don't you just kind of let everybody know where they can find some information about you and your real estate agency and just kind of contact information for everybody to find more about you.
Yeah, right on. So whitetailproperties.com or ranchandfarmauctions.com. Ranch and Farm Auctions is a division of Whitetail Properties. We've gotten into that business the last 3 or 4 years, but literally if you go into whitetailproperties.com, you'll see, I think we're like in 41 states now. So it doesn't matter if you're listening from in Minnesota, North Dakota, heck, it doesn't make a difference. You could be in Oklahoma. We're going to have agents across the country. So whitetailproperties.com is the spot to go. If you want to get a hold of me directly, I handle West Central Minnesota. You can call me at 701-367-2376, but whitetailproperties.com is the avenue.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate your time and all your information. I know it's going to be very valuable to a lot of people out there, because there's a lot of people out there just like myself where I had no clue on where to start, and this will help out a lot, and I appreciate your time, and thanks again, Ziggs.
Well, yeah, thank you, Joe. I appreciate it. It was fun.
Well, I hope you guys were able to take something from that podcast. I appreciate Zig sitting down with me and just discussing a lot of questions that I have had throughout the years, and I know a lot of people out there have questions as well, and hopefully Zig was able to answer some of those questions for you. But I just want to thank you guys for tuning in. Thanks, Zig, again for sitting down there and doing that little podcast with me. Also thanking our partners, Arctic Shield, Domain Outdoor, Fourth Arrow Camera Arms, Tacticam, and then also someone I've kind of left out. He's a good friend of mine here, the Fish Guide, Nick. Nick does a lot of guiding here in the Brainerd Lakes area, but also, rumor has it, he might be doing some guiding down in Florida. Nick's big into fishing. He catches some big fish. I know, from muskie to walleye, you name it. He does it all. And then also Skullcraft. Justin over at Skullcraft contacted me this week and wanted to partner up with us, and I'll tell you what, he does some pretty good work. He's got a lot of employees, well over 1,000 employees, and those employees are his beetles. So if you're looking for a nice European mount, you might want to contact Skullcraft here in central Minnesota, and they'll be able to help you out. Lastly, I want to thank you guys, the listeners, for tuning in once again, and hopefully you guys were able to enjoy that podcast. And last thing I ask is if you would please continue to subscribe to our YouTube channel, our social media posts, and then also, lastly, give us a little 5-star rating here on this podcast, wherever you're listening to it. We appreciate everything you guys do for us, and until next time, have a great day.